Welcome to On the Corner of Main Street, presented by Plaza Hotel and Casino in downtown Las Vegas. Here is Plaza CEO Jonathan Jossel, Gary Vickery, and I'm your host, Lisa Melmed. Welcome to On the Corner of Main Street. Hey, Jonathan, how are you?
Wonderful to be here, Lisa. We are missing one.
Gary.
Gary's very busy.
Congratulations to Gary. He is taking on a whole new bunch of roles here at the Plaza.
I don't want to make it sound like he's leaving us. I mean, he's just doing some other things.
He better not be leaving the podcast.
No, that's correct. But he's just doing some other things, and when time permits, he'll be back on.
Yeah,
with
he's
us.
focusing.
Correct. And by the way, we need it right now because last week the masks came off. I think it would have gotten busy anyway because obviously Omicron's calmed down, the flights aren't getting cancelled, Super Bowl's always a busy time of year, but there is a noticeable difference in the last 7 days in business levels.
Wow.
And,
well, we had a big game.
Yeah, of course, Super Bowl. But even still, since then, this whole week's been much busier than the prior weeks, and it just feels like everyone's in a good mood. Super Bowl was a huge success. We had 1,400 people upstairs watching the game. We had about another 300 downstairs watching the game. It was pretty cool to see.
And you said you wanted the Rams to win, and they won.
I predicted the Rams a while back, and yes, I'm very happy about the Rams. A few of our customers also like the Rams a lot.
You posted someone's bet.
Someone did very well on the Rams, yes.
They bet 10,000 and won 90,000.
Had like 8.5 to 1. Yeah, they won 90,000.
Wow.
Yeah, not bad.
And the halftime show won like I predicted.
You did? Did you predict that, or did you say adverts?
I switched it to the halftime.
Halftime show was excellent.
Yeah.
Universally liked halftime show, which is unusual because usually after halftime show there's like memes and jokes and things like that. But it was very good.
Yeah.
And for me it was just nice to see all of our customers back. The team was happy.
Yeah.
And the place had a good energy again.
Such a good energy. It felt different. Like it has not felt this way in the last 2 years.
It did not. You're correct. And Super Bowl last year was so depressing with the different rooms. It was nice to be back. Say that.
And then we have March Madness coming up.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's going to be big again. We've rented an entirely new. We've purchased entirely new equipment for the display. So
it's really?
Going to be the biggest setup we've ever done.
Like more TV.
Well, you have got a very impressive sports hotel across the street. You need to stay somewhat competitive with that. So yes, all new giant screens.
Wow.
And, the showroom will be set up this year for the March Madness, but March is looking good, and it's also the 2-year anniversary in March, so of the shutdowns. Mm-hmm. So I think it's going to be a nice bump in business again.
Yeah. And do you know what else it is the 2-year anniversary of?
The podcast.
Yeah.
Is it really?
Yeah.
2 years.
2 years.
I just thought it was 1 year.
2 years, and we've made some amazing announcements on this podcast, like the Sand Dollar, which is getting so close to opening.
You should do we'll do it next week, maybe like a little tour behind the scenes, show everyone the exciting progress in there. It is starting to come together and look very,
well,
very
follow
good.
us at Plaza Las Vegas. Follow us on the podcast. We are posting videos, sharing the secrets behind the scenes of what is going on in there.
Really looking good. It's taking shape. I'm excited.
And we just re-signed with Brian Christopher for the BC Slots area 2022 for the rest of the year with him. So I'm really excited about that. He's coming out next week to film a live stream, I think, with $22,000 on February 2nd, 2022.
Yeah, and he and I are working on some big announcements with you, everybody, for something even bigger that hopefully will come together.
Yes.
But for the year, we're excited to have him back on. It's been a great partnership.
Yes.
He's a wonderful promoter of the Plaza, and his fans are huge fans of ours now, and it's just great to have that connection. And also, I think I think the fact that now we're his exclusive partner in downtown Las Vegas means that he'll be spending even more time here.
Yeah, we hope so. We love him. And
we
so
do.
speaking of...
And his team.
And his
team
whole
are great
team.
people.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
The best. His influence on the casino has been amazing, but, it all started before social media. There was just newspapers. Mm-hmm. And today's guest has something to do with that.
Yeah, he's a big deal, guys.
Are you
kind of a big deal.
Today we are joined by the CEO, publisher, and editor of Las Vegas Sun, Las Vegas Sun is a locally owned and independent news source. It's been in Las Vegas since 1950. Welcome, Brian Greenspun, to On the Corner of Main Street.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Having Mr. Greenspun on this podcast is a very big honor for us. We've been wanting to have you here for many, many months.
Well, I've learned, Jonathan, that when you ask, I obey. So I'm here.
Oh, my.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. And it's nice to see you again. I know I haven't seen you in probably 2 years.
We'll call them COVID years.
Yeah, I guess just write-offs. But it was good for us because we got to start this podcast and have these conversations. So
I think it's a great idea. Anytime you can archive, if you will, history from people who've been around for a while or people who've done something of some significance, I think that's important because Las Vegas is still that town, in my view, where people are still moving here from other places and they have no concept of where it is and what it is, where they want to put roots down. So it's always good if they can learn a little something about where their new home is.
Yeah,
totally
absolutely.
agree. And I hope one day people will look back and say, gee, that's a body of work which tells a little bit of history of Las Vegas and people can hear about a moment in time that we all went through. So
I've learned a lot for sure.
Well, I hope you do it for at least another 45 minutes or so.
Thank you.
All right, so let's start at the beginning of your story. And of course, we have to start with your father. He is Vegas royalty, Hank Greenspun. I read he was one of the few locals invited to Elvis and Priscilla's wedding. He was friends with Bugsy Siegel and Howard Hughes. What can you tell us about him?
Were you born here, Brian?
Yes,
You were
I
born
was.
in Las Vegas?
Yes.
Wow.
I tell people who ask that I got to Las Vegas 2 weeks before Bugsy Siegel opened the Flamingo Hotel. So I predate modern Las Vegas, if you will.
Okay.
I didn't know much when I got here. I was born here, so, at 2 weeks old, I didn't know anything, and people will say
boy.
today I don't know much more. But
Was
yes,
it 1940? I don't want to age you, but the
1946.
Flamingo opened in...
I'm already aged myself, 1946.
Okay, yep.
Your dad drove
So-
down here, and you were with your mom.
So here's the story. My dad wrote a lot of the story in a book he wrote in 1967 called Where I Stand. Now, there's an original name. And I would recommend it to you guys. It is a marvelous read, not only about Las Vegas in the early days, but about his life, frankly, the beginning of the State of Israel, 1948, and what he did there and what many people did there. And it's a great trip through that part of our history, Las Vegas's history and America's history in those days. But he came out here. He was in World War II, and he was a lawyer after he got out. And they had a client in their office who wanted to build a racetrack in a place called Las Vegas. Now imagine, if you will.
So he was a lawyer. Where was he?
He was a lawyer in New York.
Okay.
Sorry, yeah. And he had been injured in the war. He had frostbite, and they were going to cut his feet off.
Oh my!
In those days, he's got frostbite, cut it off, and we'll move on. But they didn't. As a result of that, though, he was always a little more cold than the next guy, right? And so he didn't like cold weather. Well, who does anymore? So in his law firm, because he was a little older than most of the lawyers, and he had a car, and they had a client. And they said, this client has to go to a place called Las Vegas. Hank, his name Herman then, he got Hank when he got out here, but you drive him out and figure out how to build a racetrack in this place called Las Vegas, wherever that is.
Okay.
Now imagine Las Vegas, for people listening. We're on Fremont Street. I mean, we're in the heart of what was Las Vegas in 1946. The tail end of Las Vegas was what is now Sahara and the Strip. Okay? So go out another 3 or 4 miles, and Siegel is building the Flamingo Hotel. And there's nothing basically but desert, a few little places, but desert from Sahara. It was called San Francisco Avenue back then. From Sahara to where he was building the Flamingo. Okay? When my dad got here, it was under construction. The El Rancho Hotel was up. I mean, it was already there, across from where the Sahara is now. And he checks into the hotel. Now, he's driven out here in October. He's had rain and sleet and snow and tornadoes and whatever the heck goes on in the United States that time of year. And he shows up here, and it's a typical Las Vegas October day, somewhere in the high 70s.
Right.
He goes swimming,
Of course.
right?
Yeah.
He calls my mother, who was a war bride, My sister was about a year old. My mother was pregnant with me. He calls my mother back in New York, and he said, get on a train, come out to Las Vegas. I'm never coming back. That was the first day he got here.
Wow.
Okay?
That's incredible.
But I don't know if it was the kind of vision or if it's his way of just saying, I'm cutting ties with everything back there. Here is a place, and it's a wide open desert landscape. You can make your own pictures, right?
Yeah.
You can visualize and do anything you want out here. And that motivated my dad.
Did he know it got to 115 in the summer, or was he just...
This was October.
It was perfect.
This
right.
was the first day.
Yeah, exactly.
The third day, he might have made a different decision.
Right.
Yes, she got off on the train right there.
Wow.
And but he needed something to do. He was a lawyer, so he thought, well, okay, I'll take the bar and become a lawyer, but you have to study for it out here and do all that stuff. How do I make a living and support my family? He got into the publishing business of a little tiny magazine called Las Vegas Life.
What was the population here in 1946?
10. No. When I was born, there were, I think, 15 or 16,000 people.
So there's a newspaper for 15,000.
There was. The Review Journal was here.
Okay.
Okay? That started, or its predecessor, in 1905 or something like that. So the Review Journal was the only paper here. And anyway, he started publishing this little magazine, and it took him out to what was or what is now the Strip, but the entertainment part of town, which was a lot on Fremont Street, and I think Peter Lind Hayes and his mother, I think it was Mary Healy, I think that was her name, had a place called the Red Rooster, and that's where whatever entertainers were here would hang out there after their shows. And my dad used to write about that. And he wrote about this new guy in town who was building a hotel. His name was Benjamin Siegel. And he described him as a man who lives on the periphery of polite society. Well, for anyone who's over 40, they'll know what that is. For everyone who just got out of school in the last few years, don't have a clue what that means. But it's another way of saying he came from the underworld.
Right.
But my dad referred to him in glowing terms like that. He recognized what this guy was doing. He was building this first-class hotel that was going to employ hundreds and hundreds of Las Vegans back then. All right? He thought that was a pretty good thing for this town, and it helped my dad envision what would come 10, 20, 30, 40 years later. Okay? So he said, this is a pretty good gig. I think I will stick around, So he was publishing the magazine. And in those days, the printing plant at the Review Journal printed his magazine. Review Journal was just down the street. And
on the other side of the freeway?
No, it was down on Main Street.
Okay, right.
And there was nothing over there. So he's up there. He's at the Review Journal place. It was 2 stories, and he's climbing, either going up or down the stairs, I don't remember. And some guys going the other way, and they banged into each other. They could have moved over a little bit, but they banged. No, neither of them was going to give way to the other. The other one goes into his jacket. His hand goes into the inside of his jacket. And he says, "Who are you?" My dad says, reaches out his hand. He says, "I'm Hank Greenspun. Who are you?" He says, "My name is Benjamin Siegel."
Wow.
And he said, "Wait a minute." He says, "You're the guy who wrote that article about me." He said, "That's the best article, something I've ever read," or something
he said nice
like
words
that.
about him.
And he takes his hand back out of his jacket, and he says, "You're the only guy who's ever done this to me who's going to live." And with that, he paid him in cash for an ad on the back of his magazine for the rest of the year, which, that made the magazine back then. So that's how my dad got here, and that's basically what kept him here. In this town, the red and black had a different meaning, but it took him from the red and put him in the black for the year, just buying that one page on the back page. So anyway, Siegel opens the hotel December 26th or 27th. It's open for a few days, a week, maybe. Everyone from Hollywood comes and goes, and the hotel shuts down because
it wasn't ready, right?
It either wasn't ready or the people weren't ready for it unless they brought them in. It reopened in March or April of 47, and the head of marketing, the caller of bingo, the parker of cars, and the all-around jack of trades was my father at the Flamingo Hotel. He went to work for Bugsy. While he's studying for the bar, while he's doing his magazine,
And you're like are you born yet?
I'm born. I'm a few months old.
Okay.
I don't think my dad
So your
worked.
father was working at the Flamingo?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's where he met Howard Hughes and way back when. And he met a lot of people in those early days, but he was only there for a month or two.
Okay.
And that's when Siegel was killed. And when Siegel was killed, my dad took the exit door.
Probably smart.
Well, he knew the guys who came in to take over. And he thinks, I guess this is going from bad to worse, so it's good for me this is a good time to leave.
Of course.
He knew all those guys. He had relationships with those guys, but he wasn't one of them and didn't want to be part of them. But he recognized their importance to the early growth of Las Vegas, without any question.
So what did your father leave to do? Did he go back to the magazine?
He went back to the magazine. It wasn't long after that, I don't know if it was a day or a week or a month, when he gets a knock on his door at night. He's about ready to open with partners the first radio station in Las Vegas.
Okay.
The governor, Charlie Russell, coming down from Carson City, which was a big deal in those days. The governor didn't even know where Las Vegas was, basically. But he was coming down to cut the ribbon. It was a big deal, the first radio station. And my mother, who was working at the Flamingo in a dress shop, I think it was called Fanny's.
I thought you were going to say Freday's.
No. I'm not sure she would have done that. But, although she loved Freddie, by the way.
Okay.
I think it was Fanny's. Was waiting for my father to pick her up from the Flamingo and take her to the opening of this radio station. While all that's happening, my dad is home getting dressed. It's a big night for him. They're opening this first station, blah, 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 blah. And this knock on the door comes. He opens the door, and he recognizes his cousin, Ray Selk, from Los Angeles. And he's got another guy with him who introduces himself as Al Schwimmer.
Okay.
And that's when the whole new saga starts. I could tell you that. It's a great story, but it's a longish story.
Okay.
It's not as long as Oscar's stories. His stories are really exciting.
We want to hear it. We want to hear a great story.
Well, I think it formed my father's outlook from then on about what his mission in life was.
Mm-hmm.
Al Schwimmer had just volunteered to help the Haganah, which was the underground Israeli army. This is prior to Israel becoming a state. Obtain weapons, airplanes, munitions, whatever they needed, because in 1948, the United Nations was going to partition Palestine, create the state of Israel, and they knew there was going to be a war. And so far, the only Jews in Israel were farmers, as best they could tell.
Right.
So he came knocking on the door, and he told my father this story. My father hearkened back to his years in the war when he would go to these war-torn cities in France that used to have thousands of Jewish people living there and lost them all to the Holocaust. And, he made a commitment to himself, if this opportunity ever comes for me to do something, I'm going to do it. Well, it came knocking on his door. They wanted my dad involved because Al and Ray, knew airplanes. They didn't know anything about munitions. Well, my dad was a captain and then a major in the Army during the war, and he commanded munition. He knew all about weapons. And they said, we need one of those. So he said, okay, I'll do it. He said, I can't go now. I got to go pick my wife up, and I got to, do this, and I got to pack my suitcase. And
how about
you got the governor coming? I'll see you in a couple of weeks. And they said, no, it doesn't work like that. You're in. Here's your plane ticket. You're going to Hawaii tonight. What am I doing in Hawaii tonight? He said, there's a man over there who's got a war surplus yard. And he's got all kinds of airplane engines and things that we need for the war effort. You're going to go over there and arrange to get them from him. well, okay, I'll go tomorrow. I got to go pick my... No, you're going now. You don't need a bag. You'll get clothes when you get over there. Here's your ticket. Your plane leaves in an hour. Of course, in those days, a plane leaving from Las Vegas, it's not like it was today. There was a cyclone fence on Las Vegas Boulevard. There were 3 gates. It said number 1, number 2, number 3, and you open a cyclone gate and walk to the airplane.
Wow.
Sitting right there. So it was not a big deal getting to the airport.
Right.
And so he left.
I'm surprised there's planes that flew direct to Hawaii.
Well, no, they didn't. They go to L.A. and then they take a clipper ship or something over to Hawaii. So Ray said he'd tell my mother, make up something because... And so if you hear the story afterwards from my mother years later, she took a taxi home because my father left her and nobody called, no one told her anything. And she said, well, that was just your father. He did that a lot. But she didn't realize he'd gone to Hawaii. So he gets over to Hawaii. He meets this man, Nathan Liff, a Jewish man. He tells him the story, what's coming.
In Hawaii.
In Hawaii.
Yep.
And Mr. Liff says, here's a big yard. Take anything you want. It's yours. So my dad starts looking around. And he sees right next to this war surplus yard is a Navy depot. A big fence, Marine guards guarding it, but just on the other side of the fence, he sees all these crates, and he thinks to himself, I wonder what's there. So that night, he and a friend of his who was over there, he cuts a hole in the fence. They wait till the guards go the opposite direction, because in those days, shoot on sight if someone's getting and doing that. It's right after the war. And they sneak in, and they open some of these crates, and they're brand new 50 caliber machine guns, all kinds of ammunition, and whatever. My dad figures, well, Israel needs these more than he needs these airplane engines. And he delays his trip. Instead of going for 2 days, he's there for 2 weeks. And every night, they'd go through the hole in the fence with a forklift, and they stole tons and tons and tons of all this, brand new equipment from the Navy Yard.
Wow.
They brought it back to the other side. They put it in the crates marked airplane engines, and they shipped it to Los Angeles.
Wow.
Now they get back to Los Angeles.
He never got caught?
You want the whole story? You want to get...
What's wrong with you? Tell the story.
You want to get to the end
nervous.
of the story? By the way...
He threatened us that he wasn't going to tell the story. Now he's telling it, and you're freaking cutting him off, saying...
Well, we're not going to get past 48 if I tell this story. But in any event, I'm very proud of this story and all the people who were involved in it.
Yeah.
So he gets back to Los Angeles, and they realize at that point that the FBI's on their trail. You don't do anything in secret. And it's against the law, by the way, to
steal
steal from the United States Navy, and 2, ship contraband military equipment, because there was a law in the books in the United States that specifically prohibited any weapons or any equipment of war going to Israel.
The U.S. Neutrality Act?
The Neutrality Act, exactly.
Oh, Lisa.
Very good.
Wow.
So the feds knew what was going on, and they were tracking everybody, and my dad got word that they were going to raid this warehouse where they were keeping all this stuff until they figured out what to do with it. My dad said, okay, we're going to Mexico tonight. And he made a deal with some small yacht captain, to pile all this stuff in his boat, and my dad told him he was just going to take him to Catalina. They were going to offload it, put it on another ship, and that's all he had to do. And when they loaded these weapons and stuff on the boat all night, and in the morning, early morning, the portholes of the boat were underwater. It was so heavy. The guy said, I'm not going. You're going to sink my boat. My dad said, you made a deal, you're going. And we're going to go all the way to Mexico. Enough with this other stuff. The guy said, I'm not going. I want more money. My dad said, you made a deal, I made a deal, you're going. And he pulls out a gun, puts it up to the guy's head, and said, you're worried about the weight of this boat? I can lighten the load with one bullet. He said, you got to count to 5, and you're going to tell me which one it's going to be. When he gets to 4, the guy says, we're going to Mexico. I love Mexico, right? So they take off, and they go to Mexico. Now they get there, they offload all this stuff into Mexico, and now they got to get it from the west side of Mexico to the east side, Tampico Bay, where the ships come in to harbor, and they can sail out to get to the Atlantic that way. So my dad goes and he makes a few deals. He meets the president of Mexico and the top general, and it was a lot like Las Vegas became.
Why? Because he had the arms.
They had to get permission. They had to get permits to ship this stuff across the country, and then to get the export permits, right? Yep. And of course, the Mexican government didn't want to get crossways with the American government, and Neutrality Act, and all that stuff. So my dad makes friends with, I guess, the president of Mexico, Miguel Alemán, and his top general, and he gives them like many thousands and tens of thousands of good reasons why this should happen. And so they have a deal, and they're getting ready to ship all this stuff to the other side of Mexico, when there's a story in the paper that morning that talks about this agent of the new Israeli government taking arms and contraband to Israel with the help of the Mexican government. So they call my dad and they say, get over here. He goes over there and they said, look at this story, we can't do it. They had a huge Arab population in Mexico City, very influential, and they were raising hell. And it just wasn't going to happen. My dad said, whoa, that story's baloney. They said, what do you mean? They said, I'm not an agent of Israel. He said, I'm an agent of Generalissimo Chiang Kai-shek. Chiang Kai-shek was the Chinese general who took the mainland Chinese over to Formosa, Taiwan, to create the Republic of China, as opposed to Mao Zedong, who had the People's Republic of China on the mainland. And that's why China today still wants to go get that little island in Taiwan, who don't make anymore all the semiconductor chips that we run out of. By the way.
That's where they come from.
But so, in any event, he said,
hold on, have the Hawaiians noticed that all their arms are missing yet?
Yeah. I don't. Well, the feds are on their tail.
Right. Okay.
So they said, "Can you give us proof of this?" My dad said, "Of course I'll be back here at 5:00 today, and I will give you proof that I'm working for Chiang Kai-shek." They said, "That would be great. We can give you the permits." So now my dad leaves the office. He's with his friend Willie Saz now, and he says, "What do we do now?" And they're walking down Chapultepec Park or whatever it is, and they see Embassy of China on one of the buildings. It's a Sunday. And the way he told the story, he said, we go to the door, and it's closed, of course. It's Sunday, but there's this Chinese fella inside, and they bang on the door. The guy comes to the door, and my dad says, we're going to China, and we need some maps and some things. We don't know anything about China. Can you help us? He says, we're closed. He says, no, just let us in. My dad's very persuasive when he wants to be. The guy opens the door, and my dad said in Yiddish to his friend Willie, take this guy over there and let me look around. So while he's over there looking at maps and all that stuff on the wall, my dad is going through all the desks. He sees a huge stamp, the old stamps they used to have that said Embassy of China or something on it. He took all kinds of documents from China and blank paper with the embassy's letterhead, stuffs it in his overcoat, motions to Willie, okay, we're done here, and they leave. Now what are they going to do? Well, down the street is a Chinese restaurant. They go into the Chinese restaurant and they take the menu. They take it back to their hotel or wherever they're staying, and they copy, Mugu Gai Pan and whatever the Chinese was, they copy it onto the top of this letterhead. And at the bottom, they translate it in Spanish that says, to whom it may concern, this is Chiang Kai-shek, and this is introducing Colonel Herman Greenspun, of my army. Please give him all, use your good offices, et cetera, and please help him. And they stamped it with all the stamps. It was very official, and at 5:00, they take it back to the president's office.
Tell me you still have that document.
No. I never. They hand it to the folks there. They said, great, here's your things. Get out of Dodge. Go. They knew it was phony, but it was enough for them to tick the box to say they've got this. So my dad takes off with all this stuff, and it's a long train ride over to Tampico Bay. They offload it, and the ship's captain in Tampico Bay does the same thing the guy did in San Pedro. He said, I'm not going. My dad said, okay, I've been in this picture before, and he pulls his gun out one more time. He said, the choice is yours. The guy's wife says, you wouldn't do it. My dad said, try me, I've done it before. Anyway, they sailed. Now, fast forward to after my dad dies in 1989, we did a documentary. Wasn't completed till 2008 or 9, somewhere in there.
I saw it, I think.
You probably
at
saw it.
Jewish Film Festival.
Yes, you did. And you saw Shimon Peres, who at the time he filmed then was the president of Israel.
Uh-huh.
But at the time that this ship got to Israel, Shimon was a very young man in Haifa, one of the people who were offloading all these weapons in Haifa to help in the War of Independence. And that's when Shimon said in the documentary, if it wasn't for Hank Greenspun, Israel, a lot of people would have died. Israel might not be here.
Wow.
If you go back and look at a movie called, gosh, I can't think of it. It was about Colonel Mickey Marcus. Kirk Douglas played him, a Marine colonel who went over and volunteered in the War of Independence. Oh, my gosh. See, this is what happens when you get me in my latter stages. Anyway, the movie is about Mickey Marcus taking all this ragtag...
Cast a Giant Shadow?
Cast a Giant Shadow. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Google. And in that movie, they built this road all the way to Haifa from Jerusalem because the Arabs controlled the main highway, or the only highway. And they went to Haifa, and they got all these weapons, and they went down and they broke the siege of Jerusalem and took the Negev. And that's what turned the war. It wasn't until Shimon Peres told us the story that he said, these are the weapons that Mickey Marcus got that broke the siege of Jerusalem and took the Negev and won the war. So you see the connection.
Well, we're very grateful to your father.
But it was a 30 or 40 year span before we understood what the connection was. The point was, when my dad gets back, you asked what he did. All that was a question, what did he do after Bugsy Siegel? That's what he did after Bugsy Siegel. Anyway, he comes back, and to answer your question, it was a violation
just
of the
for
law.
my own curiosity,
Yeah.
Was that a business, or was he just donating?
Oh, no. He
stole
nothing.
and he gave.
He stole and he gave.
Okay.
Oh, no, this was all,
Yeah.
no, there was no business.
Okay.
He wasn't built that way. But he comes back, and of course, he comes back and he gets indicted. So that kept him busy.
Okay.
He got indicted twice. He and Al Schwimmer and a bunch of others got indicted for the airplane thing. My dad was acquitted because he had nothing to do with the airplanes. Then they indicted him on the Neutrality Act for the weapons. And my dad was getting ready to fight it when they called him back to New York to the headquarters. A guy named Teddy Kollek was running the operation. Teddy later became the mayor of Jerusalem after the 1967 war. A fabulous man, but he's the guy that David Ben-Gurion sent to New York to run this whole operation. Kollek calls my dad back. He said, you need to plead guilty. My dad said, I'm not pleading guilty to this. This is, blah, 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 blah. I'm going to fight this. He said, no. Here's the deal. If you plead guilty, the federal government will not indict all the flyers who went over there and volunteered, all the financiers who gave the money to buy the weapons, all the people who volunteered to fight alongside the Israelis. They will leave them alone. They just want you. So when they tell my dad that story, he's got no choice. He says, okay, I'll take the plea. So he pleads guilty.
Okay.
And he goes, and now by this time he's got the newspaper. And he's down in L.A., one as a defendant, and two, he's covering the trial. And he's writing the stories every night.
His own trial.
His own trial. Yeah, it was a tight operation. Okay. In any event, it comes time for the sentencing. And Judge Hall, who was the judge, my dad stands up, and he's fully prepared that he's going away for 5 years or 3 years or some number. He's already said goodbye to my mom, who's sitting there, and on and on and on. And Judge Hall says, Mr. Greenspun, you were the ringleader. You were the guy in charge. This was a terrible crime, blah, 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 blah. But knowing what compelled you to do this, I can't find it in my heart to send you to prison. So he put him on probation, fined him $10,000, and let him walk out.
Wow.
So now my dad comes back to Las Vegas, and he's somewhat of a hero.
Wow.
Okay.
And JFK pardoned him.
JFK pardoned him in 1961, I think it was. Yeah, 1961.
How cool.
How
could you not share the story with us?
After Kennedy, well, you only have 45 minutes. After Kennedy won the election, he pardoned my dad after my dad supported Richard Nixon against Kennedy.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah.
I want to go back to one more thing with your father. So he left the night this radio section was about to open. Then he came back to the radio station that he wanted to turn into a TV channel, and he put the first black man on TV. Can you tell us how he was instrumental in ending
Well, it didn't all happen just like that, but yeah, you just went through 10, 15 years. It's good. You're very good at that stuff. My dad got into the newspaper business in 1950 because Reynolds, who had the Review Journal, locked out his printers and his typesetters. And so in those days, the union for the typesetters and the printers, when that happened, would start what they called a free press, basically to keep their people working while they went through their labor issues. They came to my dad after a couple of weeks and said, "We can't carry this thing. You did a magazine. You know all about journalism. You wrote the paper at Camp Livingston during the war. Why don't you buy this newspaper from us? We'll make a very good deal, and you can run this newspaper." Well, it just happened to hit my dad at the right time because he hated what the Review Journal was doing. In those days, the headlines didn't say Joe Smith arrested for burglary. They said Joe Smith, Negro arrested for burglary. Harry Silver, Jew arrested for burglary. Whatever that was.
Wow.
They were miserable. My view, they're not a lot better, but they've improved somewhat with the ages, somewhat. But in any event, he used to just boil his blood every morning. He wanted to do something, and here they were handing him a newspaper. And he loved to write, and he loved to be active, let's say. So he bought the newspaper. You know the Thomas and Mack?
Yep.
It's named after Perry Thomas and Jerry Mack,
Yep.
their families. Jerry's father, Nate Mack, owned the Bank of Las Vegas. My dad told Nate what he wanted to do. Nate said, "You write whatever check you need to write, I'll cover it." This was back in 1950.
Wow.
And that's how my dad got into the newspaper business. As he got in, he's running around trying to right wrongs, tilting at windmills, doing all that kind of stuff. He goes after Senator Joe McCarthy. He's the first newsman in America to go after Senator Joe McCarthy. There was a movie with George Clooney about how Edward R. Murrow, a great newscaster, went after Joe McCarthy. I think it was in 1953 or 54. A year earlier, my dad was kicking the hell out of Joe McCarthy.
Wow.
And he got Dwight Eisenhower, who was president, got his brother to say that Joe McCarthy is no good. I think he said he's a no good SOB, but I'm not sure. And they went to the President of the United States and said, "Do you have a comment about what your brother said about McCarthy?" And Eisenhower's quote was, "Well, I cannot call my brother a liar." And all that started the downfall of Joe McCarthy. And then my dad went after Pat McCarran. Gave me a great deal of pleasure to see the airport renamed to the Harry Reid Airport
Harry Reid.
for two reasons. One, because of Harry Reid.
Yeah.
But two, to get that bum's name off the airport, in my view. It's my personal view.
Yeah,
that's all.
That's why you're here.
So, in any event, my dad's doing all this stuff, and he still hasn't fixed the Review Journal and this moniker that the Las Vegas had back in the days as being the Mississippi of the West.
Oh, did it have that?
We were called the Mississippi of the West.
Wow.
And in those days, you may have heard the stories about black entertainers at the hotels. There were many of them. Couldn't stay at the hotels where they played. Couldn't eat at the hotels where they played. Had to go in the back doors, do their entertaining, and then leave and go all the way over to what was the west side of town, on the other side of Bonanza, to sleep in a hotel. I think Z. Louis owned the place down there, maybe a couple of others.
Yeah.
There's lots of wonderful stories about those times. But one of the bad stories was the way they were treating African-American, black entertainers. And my dad was very, very friendly with the Rat Pack guys. He used to hang out with Sinatra and Sammy Davis and all those guys. They were great friends. And those guys used to talk about it. They would joke about it on stage, but they talked about, we got to do something.
Yeah, didn't Sammy Davis have that issue at a few venues?
Well, of course.
Yeah.
Well, of course. And, because they were all there together and they were talking about it, and Sinatra and Martin, they all wanted to do something to help Sammy Davis, but generally they thought it was wrong. I think it was Eartha Kitt, some black female singer, I don't remember which one, went swimming in one of the pools on the Strip. They emptied the pool before their white patrons would go swimming.
That's horrendous.
That's what this town was like. So my dad decided that's enough. We're not going to do this. Around the same time that the NAACP was talking about marching on the Strip. Las Vegas had become a city that everyone was paying attention to in the late 50s. And my dad realized that it was really bad for business. It was terrible for human relations, and it was also going to be very bad for business if they had these kind of marches. Who knows what would break out? So he got the governor, Grant Sawyer, and he took the governor and he got every owner of a hotel, and he took them to what was the Moulin Rouge Hotel. It was a black-owned hotel over off of Bonanza.
North.
Just on north, north of here. And they locked him in a room, and he said, we're going to settle this. You guys are not leaving until we settle this. Well, Hank, we can't do that. Da-da-da-da-da-da. My dad looked at the governor, and he said, you can ask the governor. He said, any of you leave is not going to have a gaming license. So you're going to sit here. And I guess Grant Sawyer must have nodded or something. Anyway, they came out of that night. They came out of what was called with the Moulin Rouge Agreement, which desegregated the Strip years ahead of the Civil Rights Act and everything else that desegregated America, from Congress.
How amazing.
Yeah, it was amazing. In that whole process, my dad met a man named Bob Bailey. And Bob Bailey was this very well-spoken, articulate human being with a twinkle in his eye. And I don't know if he was a dancer or a singer. I don't know what he came out of the entertainment world, but boy, he had it all. And he went to my dad and he said, this town needs a show about entertainment and a show that's owned and run by black people. My dad said, you're right, we need one of those. He didn't know he needed one, but he was so taken with Mr. Bailey. They became very, very close friends. And anyway, my dad hired him, and they promoted it like crazy. The first black-owned, produced, everything show in the country was right here on KLAS TV. And Bob knew everybody, and he had every great entertainment on. It was a wonderful, wonderful show, long before we heard of Johnny Carson and Jack Parr and all those guys. We had the Bob Bailey show here. Wow. And Bob Bailey would take Nat King Cole, for example, down to the Tropicana Hotel to go in to see the show or to do something, and they wouldn't let them in. Why can't you come in? This is Nat King Cole. And the guard said, I don't care if it's a black Jesus. He's not coming in here. This is for white people, that kind of thing. And, that just further enraged my father and convinced him along. And Bob Bailey was a huge moving force. And all the great, the pastors and ministers on the west side in those churches, they got them all together. It was a small town, and 10 people could motivate everybody. And that's what happened. That's how the Strip got desegregated. And it's not the end of the story, but it was the start of a good story.
Your father
That's an
wow.
unbelievable story. I mean, every story is unbelievable.
Well, there's plenty more.
Well, I'm sure, and we might have to do a second episode of this. But Rich is saying yes. Rich is saying good for 2 episodes. But was your father ever in the gaming business?
No, my father. Now his kids were.
Okay.
But my father wasn't. He never was. And he used to tell me, he said, Brian, I write a column. I have been offered millions of dollars to write one column. Back in the day, my dad's column made or broke. It made someone or it broke them. Well, practically anybody in this town. And if my dad had written a column, I'll use Mo Dalitz, for example. That Mo Dalitz is a good guy and he should get a gaming license. He may have had one. I'm saying I just used his name.
Yeah.
Then he would get a gaming license. It was, that kind of town. It was very influential. And he was offered by people who couldn't get gaming license millions of dollars and points in all these hotels. And my dad told me, he said, I could have been a very wealthy man. He said, I'm not. I could have been had I written 1 column or 2 columns. He said, it wasn't in me to do that. They were bums, and I wasn't going to do that. And so he never did. Fast forward, after my dad passes away, we've got all that land out in Green Valley. Ideal place for gaming casinos and stuff along what would be, it wasn't then, the 215 and on and on and on. And I went into this, what would Hank do? And before my dad passed away, I said, there's a lot of development out here in Green Valley, and gaming is probably going to be part of it. What do you think about that? He said, the time wasn't right and gaming wasn't right for me. He says, you kids will have to make a different decision or your own decision based on what's happening then. He said, I can't tell you what to do and I won't tell you what to do. I just know at my time, I was not going to get in bed with those hoods. And that was the message to me that said, well, if you're not getting into bed with hoods, it's okay, because it's a legit business now. We've matured. The industry had matured 40 years later, and that's why we got into the gaming business. It was relatively short-lived. I think the crash in 2008 changed everybody's mind.
Was that Green Valley?
Green Valley Ranch,
You built Green Valley.
We built it with the Fertitta boys.
Yep.
And Aliante. And we owned a piece of the Palms Hotel with George Maloof.
And then did you come back on the second go-round with the Palms, or just
No,
the first?
no.
Okay.
We had our own problems after the crash.
Right. But a couple of questions. One, did your father ever do anything with Rosenthal? Did he ever go on the Rosenthal show, or did he ever write a column about him? Because that seems like a natural fit.
My sister-in-law produced parts of the Rosenthal show.
Wow.
I don't believe he ever went on the Rosenthal show. Funny story, though.
Okay.
The Las Vegas Country Club, very famous for its men's grill. Not because the cheeseburgers are good, but because in the men's grill, that's where everybody came over to play gin rummy after work or whatever. And my dad was a gin rummy aficionado. So he was down there. And, you sit down at a table with your friend Bill, and Bill says, this is Joe, this is Tony, okay, let's play. And over a period of weeks, you're playing, and hi, Tony, sit down, let's play. Two guys from Newsweek or Time magazine, back in the day, they were magazines, call my dad, let's have lunch, meet me at the country club, boom, 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 boom. And they look at my dad and said, why do you associate with Anthony Spilatro? My dad said, who's Anthony Spilatro? They got here and no one knew who they were for a while.
Wow.
And they said, well, he's a mob boss, underboss, or whatever he is, fledgling boss, whatever he was, bad guy. My dad says, I don't know Anthony Spilatro, and why would you think I would ever do that? And they looked at him and said, why are you lying to us? My dad grabs the guy who said that, pulls him back across the table and says, I am not lying to you. I will not lie to you. I don't know who you're talking about. The guy says, wait a minute. He lets him go, and he pulls a picture out of Tony. My dad looks at him and says, oh, that's Tony. He never knew his name.
Wow.
And anyway, once he knew his name, I guess he stopped playing gin with him.
Uh-oh.
Now, Rosenthal.
Just so you know, we have a statue of Tony behind you.
Oh, I'm sure you do. I'm sure you do.
I'll show you on the way in.
I'm sure. You asked me early on, and we'll get back to this. You asked me early on how I grew up. Mm-hmm. Everybody, all these guys, the mob guys, who my dad knew and was friendly with many of them, because if you weren't friendly with them, there was no one else in town to be friendly with, and you better be friendly or you're going to wind up out of town deep down. Mm. And but he never let me call them Mr. and Mrs. I always had to call adults Mr. and Mrs. But I couldn't call them Mr. and Mrs. I had to call them Uncle so-and-so. My dad didn't want me to give them the respect of calling them Mr. And by calling them Uncle, it made them feel like they were part of the family, if you will.
Interesting.
Kept everybody alive.
Smart.
Well, he was a very smart man. He had multiple reasons for doing things, but most of them were to keep his kids alive and well and healthy.
Okay,
so I forgot where I was.
You were saying Rosenthal.
Oh, Rosenthal.
So
I don't know if my dad, he probably knew him casually. Never did any business with him and stuff like that. I knew Frank. In fact, after Frank left, he used to call me once or twice a year to ask me how he should advertise his sports. He had a sports business in Florida or something. He'd put the lines out. And I've bet on the Super Bowl with friends, but I don't know that I've ever made a big bet, maybe once or twice, so I'm not the guy to talk to about all that. And I used to tell Frank, he says, well, you're the only guy I know in the news business. So I would talk to Frank. My daughter and his daughter were good friends in school.
Wow.
And so, we had a relationship where our kids would play at each other's house. I didn't know who Frank Rosenthal was for a couple of years until after the word got out. I mean, I didn't know what he was doing.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned the Las Vegas Country Club.
Mm-hmm.
When I saw you at the beginning of this podcast, I told you that during the pandemic, I picked up pickleball with our mutual friend Armin.
Yes.
I also picked up golf, and I became a member at the Las Vegas Country Club.
Good for you.
It's my favorite place to go now. But there is a very cool thing there, and every time I go there, I take a picture and send it to you. You have a plaque.
Oh, on the first hole.
On the ninth hole.
Ninth hole, yes.
On the ninth hole, and it tells a story about you playing golf
Michael Jordan.
with Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
And someone gives him a bet. Oh,
Well, that plaque is a story. I'm sure it was told by former Governor Bob Miller.
yes, that's
So
what
it came out of Bob's mouth from his perspective.
Okay.
I look at those things and I chuckle. Okay. I probably just have a little different perspective, but it's generally true.
Okay.
We were doing, my dear, dear friend, Elias Ghanem, Dr. Ghanem,
Yes.
who was Elvis Presley's doctor. He was alive back then, but he was not doing real well. But he had a fundraiser for President Clinton, and he lived on the 10th hole of the Las Vegas Country Club. So we were all going to go, and then Clinton and I arranged to play golf afterwards, as long as we're at a golf course. Yes, let's play golf. And Clinton tells me he's bringing Michael Jordan with him. And let's ask Bob Miller to play. Okay, so the four of us are going to go play golf.
What a foursome.
You tell the story so casually.
Well, I went to school with Bill Clinton. I've known him since 1964. And
Wow.
I mean, I would say we're very good friends. He might say I barely know him. I don't know.
Very-
I think you're very good friends, but okay.
So, in any event.
You're playing golf with him,
So
Michael
we're
Jordan.
playing golf. I'm thrilled. I mean, I played a lot of golf with President Clinton when he was president, but I'd never played with Michael Jordan until that point. I've played with him since, but I hadn't played until that time. So I'm thrilled. So we get out on the golf course, and within minutes, every kid that lives within 5 blocks of the Las Vegas Country Club is on the golf course. Secret Service can't do anything with them. Clinton says, leave them alone, blah, blah, blah. And they come over to the cart. Jordan is riding with Clinton. Clinton's driving. And they climb over this guy, the Uber driver. They didn't know what Uber was in those days. They climb right over Bill Clinton, didn't have a clue who he was.
Michael Jordan.
All they want to do is get to Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
So Michael and I had a bet. We were both reasonably decent golfers in those days. And we had a bet, and he is killing me. I mean, destroying me. And he, you know how he used to stick his tongue out when he was playing, and then he'd shoot
a basketball,
from 50
yeah.
feet away or whatever it is, and go right in the basket. He did that when he putted. He lined it up. He got over the ball. He'd stuck his tongue out. And I went, oh no, and boom, it'd go right in. So I'm way down. I think I pressed him on the 9th hole. We get up there. It's a par 5, and Michael gets on in 2. Now, the Las Vegas Country Club had just finished a big terrace overlooking, as you know, Jonathan, the 9th hole, and it was covered with people. I don't know if they were to see Michael Jordan or President Clinton. Or maybe they were here to see me. Pretty sure. And he's on the back of the green. I'm 20 feet away, and who knows where Bob Miller is, and the president's on the green. And President Clinton says to Michael, he says, you see all those people up there? Yeah. He says, you don't want to disappoint them. He says, no, sir. He says, you need to make this putt. It's got to be a 50-foot putt from the back of that green to the front. He cans it. The crowd goes crazy, blah, 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 blah. I'm down again.
And you lose your bet.
Of course, I'm down again. So that was the story. Now, it's written a little differently, but it's okay. The gist is the same.
It's there, and it tells. Those plaques are great. They tell the story of the movie Casino, Rosenthal, the house he lived on. So there's a lot of history there, and we love it. But
I went to the opening of Rosenthal's house there. Oh. He had a housewarming. We were friends. Our kids played together. So he bought a $250,000 townhome and put $500,000 in it, and it looked spectacular. It was the only one that looked like it did, and I'm sure it had steel doors and steel walls and stuff. But we didn't know why in the day. But yeah, I went to the housewarming. A lot of people did.
Incredible stuff, Brian. So you mentioned Green Valley. Mm-hmm. This is a stupid question, but is it called Green Valley after?
So
Greenspun.
Yeah, but it's a longer story. One of the names was Greenspun Acres. No. My dad had 8,400 acres of land that he had accumulated.
He just bought it knowing that there was
no.
Vegas was going to be.
He had been buying land at $1 down and $1 a week since he got here. He told everybody who ever moved to Las Vegas, buy land. This place is going to take off. And most people who came here didn't listen to him. So when it came time to start developing, you have to figure out how to market it and what to call it and da-da-da. And the only thing my parents knew, because they had a place down in Newport Beach for the summer, it was the Irvine Ranch down in Newport with a bunch of orange groves that the Irvine Company bought and developed most of Newport Beach. And so my dad said, well, I don't want to call it Greenspun Ranch. He said, he wasn't like that. He wouldn't have done that. So they went all around with names. And somebody came up with Green Valley because it's nothing but brown dirt. But the dream was going to make it green. And that's where the name came from.
Amazing. So I think that's a good stopping point because we'd love to have you back. I know you have some stuff from Howard Hughes, some personalized notes that we want to talk about. We want to hear about your story. You write the column Where I Stand Now. We want to talk about that. And I guess your life, because we only told about half of the story so far. So if you wouldn't mind, can we take a pause and come back again whenever you're available? Is that a good break point, Lisa? No? You want to
Yes.
Well, we can't keep going.
No.
The restaurant's going to
This is so interesting. Thank you for being here with us and sharing the story. I can't wait to have you back. Where can people stay up to date with you?
LasVegasSun.com.
That's it. Thank you so much for joining us.
You're very
and sharing
welcome.
All the
Thank you.
stories.
Thank you all.
We'll be back again soon. But in the meantime, please rate, review, and subscribe. Tell your friends about On the Corner of Main Street. And of course, follow us on social. On Twitter and Instagram, it's @PlazaPod. And on Facebook, find us at Plaza Podcast. Or go right to the top and tweet Jonathan @JonathanJossel. We'll see you next time from right here on the corner of Main Street.